closely to our agenda. However, we are 15 minutes off, so thank you for your patience. We will take public participation. Any comments that anybody has, please make it now. We will take no other public comment throughout the business meeting tonight because we have a lot of things that we need to talk about and vote on as well. Who would like to go first this evening? You will have 2 minutes. Jennifer will time you. All right. Please introduce yourself so that Raina can record who you are. I greatly appreciate it, but welcome. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Lisa Kaya. I'm a Reading taxpayer and an art teacher at Prosper Valley Reading Elementary. And first of all, I want to thank you all for being here because all of you are here, which is pretty cool to have every representative here. And thank you for your work very much. I have 3 issues that I want to bring up, and they'll be brief. I'm going to call these uncomfortable awarenesses. These are things that I've become aware of that make me uncomfortable. Okay? So the first one is, last meeting, 2 weeks ago, we were presented with a letter to open the meeting, and the first sentence of that letter was, "Never in our wildest dreams did we think this merger would be as difficult and challenging as it has become." So my uncomfortable awareness is that I'm a glass half full person. Ask anyone who knows me. I have been only anticipating difficulty and challenge as we began to merge. And I realized that my perspective is very different from some of the board members, and that makes me really uncomfortable. Number 2, I found it very unsettling at the last meeting that suddenly a physical makerspace became a criteria for an elementary school. I'm not sure where that came from. I know the New View Laboratory has been a big deal, and I understand a makerspace would lead right into that. But I would just like to say that through the many years that I've taught in this district, I have seen Masterful Teachers facilitate many engineering projects that range from Lego robotics to Scribblebots to making cribbage boards to designing a scaled covered bridge to building stick shelters out in the woods, building cardboard shelters in classrooms, a sledding park with obstacles, bridges, wooden sculptures, electronics, etc. Not to mention the things that go on in the art room. These all happen in hallways, multi-purpose rooms, and classrooms. And I would argue that they are much more impactful when they are visible throughout the building, rather than having one dedicated space where they have to occur. So, my last point is that I'm really concerned that tonight's vote seems to be driven by several engineers and the finance committee, rather than educators thinking about what's best for our students. I read the board agenda, all 30 pages of it, and I didn't really see any cost savings that were actually itemized. So I'm pretty concerned about how those cost savings will occur. And I hope that will be part of tonight's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes?
Hi, Peter Seaman from Reading. Tonight the administration and some fellow board members seem to be asking you to make some pretty significant decisions that will not only affect the district schools, but also the fabric of the respective communities where they are. Decisions on faculty investments, grade configurations, and campus restructuring that are likely irreversible. So I offer 2 suggestions in mind, or for you to keep in mind as you deliberate tonight. Number 1 is first be true to the goals that this district was established on. In Act 46, that the number 1 goal was equity. Number 1 of 5, equity. Be equitable in balancing the cost savings across the district. You're looking at cost savings right now at 3 campuses that represent 20% of the budget. We should be looking across all 5 campuses for savings. Be equitable as you transition from a primary model elementary model that you're not asking one school to transition twice in 2 years while everybody else transitions once. That's not equitable. The next thing that I'd ask you to keep in mind tonight is please don't rush the decisions when you don't have to. You don't have to do a bond vote on town meeting day for the Prosper Valley School. I fully support fixing it, but please get a registered professional engineer to give you sound advice before you go ahead and spend $500,000. Don't rush the strategic planning process that we've seen tonight. The group of citizens has met once. Let that process play out and inform some of these big decisions that you're being asked to make. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm also from Reading. I'm still not a parent of a student at Reading Elementary, but I do love our school and I do love our community. As was clear from the public discussion during the workshop 2 weeks ago, I'll point it out again, small schools in our district, like Prosper Valley and Reading, are the reason that many new residents decide to move to these towns and therefore are feeding into the district at large. I'm a paramedic. I worked as a field paramedic and now work in the emergency department. And when we deal with a health issue, we try to treat the underlying pathology rather than putting on Band-Aids to try to squelch little pieces here and there. We would rather treat the whole patient. So in this same vein, I'd like to present the future actions of, or the current actions of the board and which direction it goes in the future. And I think as everyone can agree upon, the true heart of the problem, the true underlying pathology here, if you will, is dwindling school numbers tied to an aging population. So as the decisions, as many people feel probably at this point, are being rushed and shoved forward, promises such as Reading was told 3 years status quo before the town, or as the town barely joined the union. In moving forward, I see many Band-Aids being applied by setting the stage to close one small school after another, and they're succumbing to what seems to be a low-hanging fruit syndrome, when rather I would argue that that's the health of this entire unified district. I argue for focusing on how to fix the underlying problem with a more sustainable answer, allowing smaller schools to keep their staff and student population as is, and leave them intact to allow to help feed a more robust, unified district. As evidence, there are 3 new students at Reading Elementary this year. All of those families joined or have moved either in the next month or 2 or in the past 3 months specifically for Reading Elementary. I do not deny that that is the best way to feed this district. The best way to harness this ability, we could respond to Act 46 with innovation, fostering these schools to increase attraction to the district as a whole, and thereby increasing residents moving to this area. I've said this, you guys have heard me say this so many times, let the dust settle, stop forcing changes, let everything get figured out before we make another decision. There's got to be a time lag for everything to kind of settle before we decide what the best move forward is, as we saw with the mold issue. We don't want to make too many decisions quickly, move forward before we actually know what the problem is, have a legitimate licensed engineer go in and assess it so that we can also save Prosper Valley. As a taxpayer, I disagree with continuing to trim the fat. I have several friends who work or have worked for Reading or the district as a whole, and I recognize that an investment needs to be made. Currently, we have no fat to be trimmed. Our teachers are spread too thin. They're continuing to be asked to do more. Infrastructure at the middle school and high school is crumbling, as we know. It's been made clear to us. And at the end of the day, there are still entire cohorts at the high school of students that are falling short academically. So why would I and future other parents stay in this district? This is something families in Reading are now discussing. What do we do if we lose Reading Elementary? Well, we move away because we don't want to feed a system that is clearly not working in our best interest to support and have a sustainable district. So I ask for the health of our district, the health of our schools, the health of our current and future communities, because that is what it's going to affect. Let's not kill them by 1,000 cuts. The children need to be the priority. They are the key stakeholders in all of this, and thus hold the key to not only a healthy district, but our taxpayer wallets. Thank you.
Any other people like to speak? Sir?
Hi, I'm Kirk Kardashian. I live in Woodstock. I just have one simple point to make. The agenda tonight talks about a $500,000 proposed rebuild for Prosper, and I haven't seen an official report or anything about the actual conditions of the school that require this $500,000 rebuild. So I'll just advise you all, before you take any official action or anything, have something that you can stand behind and say, this is why we're doing this. It makes sense to me.
Okay. So one more voice from Reading. My name's Marie Anderson, and I'm currently the high school teacher in the district at the high school. And previously, I was an elementary school teacher for 10 years in serving several schools in the district. And I echo the sentiments of many of my friends from Reading, but I'm going to really zero in on one specific hope and suggestion for the board. And after reading the 40-page document that was provided to us previous to the meeting tonight, I kept coming back to one proposal that you'll be looking at in the budget FY20. There's 3 proposals that the Finance Committee has put forth. And the only one that I would encourage you to vote for is proposed resolution number 1. And the reason I say this, and the audience that has not read this will understand the specifics when you get to that part of the meeting, is simply that this is the only one, in my opinion, that actually respects what many people have said throughout many of these meetings over the last several months. And essentially, the proposal says that the board shall establish a committee to develop a plan for the campuses in our district, campus configuration, investment and renovation plan, financing plan, community engagement, and citizen voting. And essentially, this is the one and only resolution that actually does respect the concerns of the area citizens and fulfills Act 46 agreement that you have to actually have some sort of a plan or discussion about a plan. And it actually allows the community to still continue to offer input prior to making changes, and as everyone else has said, changes that I feel are in some sense irresponsible without full data at hand. You don't know what the situation is with Barnard, you don't know what the Prosper Valley School situation is. There are too many unanswered questions, and I don't find from the data and the savings put forth in this plan that you have all the data to actually back up the proposed changes in moving and shifting students, when if all those circumstances change, it'd be extremely difficult to go back. And so why make these kind of changes this early in the program when in this first proposed resolution it's clearly stated that the plan requires extensive community input, and while many potentially exciting options for best using our campuses can be in existence, decisions must be transparent. So I would suggest that that is the only resolution that this board considers as a vote decision.
Any other comments? Elaine?
I'm Elaine Lively, a taxpayer in Woodstock. I have children at the high school and I'm a teacher. I don't know, I have a question. Have you defined equity? Because we keep talking about this word and I don't know what it means. Equity around what? It seems like we change one inequity and we end up with another inequity somewhere else. And until we define what equity means to us, we're just going to keep doing that.
Yes?
Seth Westbrook, Pomfret resident, former school board member. just like you to consider whether our kids are a community or a commodity. You know, which one is it? Are we going to keep cutting? I know we have cuts. I know we have difficult budget challenges to solve. I understand that completely. I've been on that side of the table. But, you know, we have structural problems in how things are funded in the state. And every year, we're going to have more cuts that have to be made. So what are you going to cut next year? What are you going to cut the year after that? Let's figure out a way to do this that works and isn't sending our kids from one school to the next, bouncing them around like a ping pong ball. Thank you.
Any other comment? Okay, I'm going to close the floor to the public now. We're going to continue on. We are going to make an amendment to our agenda. I'm moving the chairperson and committee reports and superintendent's reports down below number 7 under policy. So we are going to move on to our consent agenda. Do I have a motion on the table for the approval of the agenda, consent agenda? So moved. Who do I got? Karen? Lou's a second. Rena? Thank you. Are there any questions? All those in favor of the consent agenda, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. The consent agenda has been approved. Richard is going to now update us on State of the Union for the Prosper Valley School and where we are to date since our last meeting.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm also going to ask Joe Rigoli, who's our manager of buildings and grounds, to assist on this. What we heard very clearly 2 weeks ago is let's engage engineers and get real study and certified engineers to assist in understanding exactly what the problem is there. And we heard from many people around the board, around the communities that provided recommendations. And I can tell you, and Joe can please share, has been on the phone following up on all of these recommendations with different types of engineers. I also learned a new term this year, which is a building scientist. Someone who comes in and looks at a building and says it's not working, how come? So it's not only the civil engineering side, it's the hydrology engineering side. We now are looking at the building scientist side, and we're still receiving recommendations and those from the community that would like to assist. We had one more that came in today, this afternoon, from Pomfret residents who are also engineers that said, can we assist? I know Joe was on the phone with him right away and meeting with him tomorrow morning. So what has gone on, and just to give you sort of the punchline of where we are, we still have our HVAC engineer in place. Dan Tubras is with Engineering Services of Vermont. He's been assisting us on the design of the HVAC system. What he's also asking is, okay, what are you doing on the moisture side of it so we can properly size what the HVAC system is. So he's contracted with, he's in place, but waiting for information from now other engineers. We have spoken with a group by the name of Engineering Ventures out of Lebanon, who is highly recommended by a number of different people. They actually referred Joe over to a fellow by the name of Fred McKnight, who is a building scientist with Turner Group. He's, I think, the only one who actually got back to us with a proposal. They're always willing to talk, but getting the proposal in has been challenging. So he's come in with a proposal, $7,800 to come in and review current conditions, review outside, inside, do some boring, and a whole range of things. So we have that proposal. We had one of our board members who works for a very reputable engineering firm, Sanborn Head Associates. We spoke with their geotechnical engineer. And I think, Joe, you had great conversations with him.
Yeah, a lot of insight from him. He'll be getting back to us hopefully in the next few days with a proposal. He's thinking out of the box.
Yeah, so waiting for proposal there. We have another building scientist that has been recommended from a group down in Boston. They said, we can't get a proposal to you until after the first of the year, and work won't start till sometime after that. So we're getting a range of responses, and I think what would be helpful is sort of, when do we want to actually sign the contract and say, okay, we've spoken with enough different people, let's get them in here and get the study done? Or do we hold off on a couple more of these references or these recommendations? And it may take another month in order to get the proposals to come in. They're all roughly in the same range of cost, in the $7,500 to $10,000 type of a cost for them to do the work. So now it's just a matter of how many different engineers with different specialties would we be comfortable in engaging, so as to try and determine the best reason why we have going on what we have going on, and then ultimately the best solution. Joe, anything else you want to share on conversations and what's been going on?
Most of the people have indicated that the steps we've been taking and the direction we're going is positive. They think that we're doing the right things by addressing the water on the outside, by repairing the drains, sealing, that type of stuff. What really comes down to the question is the floor itself, whether or not we should seal or do some kind of vapor barrier on the floor. We should know that.
I think a lot of you.
Can you hear that? Yeah. Did anybody hear that? No. So the folks I've talked to have indicated that we're taking the proper steps necessary to finish this project. What we're looking at is the footing drains and sealing the foundation, and they've all agreed that that's the first couple steps that should happen. The question that we're coming up with now is whether or not to install a vapor barrier that actually works, and that would be by sealing the floor or adding a membrane to the floor before we actually put down carpeting or tiling, whatever we're going to do. So hopefully in the next month or so we'll have some engineers come out and take a look at that and be able to give us a definitive answer.
And to a degree, this speaks to the first proposal that's coming in front of the board of how the building will be used going forward. If there's going to be changes to the building on the interior, and we're going to be changing around rooms, is at a time when we have flooring up or cabinetry or whatever to seal the floors while it's still open. So there are a number of pieces that are tied together on this, but I think we've got people coming in. Now the question is whether we'll get a definitive answer on what went on, why it went on, and the most likely solution.
Does the board have any questions? So Joe, do you think that the budget you have, $25,000 to secure engineers to give us a plan, to help us develop a plan, is that adequate? How many engineers or what types of engineers do you think? I know you're looking at multiple ones in various varieties. What do you think?
Yeah, we're right there at the budget. The three that we've engaged and the three that I'm hoping to get a proposal from would be the HVAC and the geotechnical engineer, which will actually go out and look at the situation we have, why the water table is so high, and the building scientist. Those three folks alone will reach right to about $25,000.
And do you feel that you need any more appropriations for any other engineers at this time? Or do you want to first see how these engineers come in with their suggestions?
I think the only engineer we haven't engaged with would be a civil engineer, and I'll be speaking to a couple gentlemen tomorrow from Pomfret, who are
Okay.
local guys, and they indicated to me that they'd be willing to do it for no cost.
Okay.
So,
Bob?
I'm still not clear on process. So does that then mean that you've got what you think you need? If you brought on a civil engineer, you'd have 4. I heard Richard ask the question, do we need to wait for more technical expertise, which could take additional time?
sure.
So have you guys answered that question as to whether adding a civil is what you think you need so you can move forward with RFPs?
I think that would be the only piece missing, would be the civil engineer. I think we have everything else covered.
Okay, so can you play it out from there in terms of time and timetable? If the civil engineer comes on in a certain time frame?
Yeah, again, most of these folks are indicating that by the time the proposal and actually getting to the work done would be after the first of the year. I've had no one come in saying that they could do that in the next month or so.
And can, it's somewhat clear to me that the technical expertise is saying do the perimeter drains first? Or you said the first 2 steps that had been identified?
Yeah, they've indicated to me that we're taking the proper steps
Okay.
by addressing the perimeter drains and sealing the foundation. They didn't necessarily indicate that we should do that first.
They did or did not?
Did not.
They did not. Would it be the intent to do that, and can you do that in January?
I would say we can dig until frost. The only concern I would have would be the actual waterproof coating that they're going to put on the foundation. I know there's a temperature limit to that. I'm just not sure what that is. Folks who do that can give me that info.
It would be helpful just to get, as you get more of a plan by talking to the engineers in terms of what might play out when, it would be helpful just to have that information.
The other thing we're going to have to do, Bob, in the case of doing the perimeter drains, we have one proposal that includes the waterproofing and the digging and the work. We have another one that's part of the work, but it's an $80,000 project. We're going to have to go out with an RFP and make it a wider distribution RFP. That's going to take a little bit of time. It has to be out there for, let's say, 2 to 3 weeks for people to be able to respond to us to make sure that we get the best pricing for what we're doing.
And it's likely then that you're going to return to the board for approval of an appropriation to cover the next stage of expense.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
So we talked about this before, like one of the core questions that we had was not just, what should we do? It was, can we solve this problem? Are we more confident now that this problem is solvable if we take these steps? Because our previous conversation has very much been, if we spend a lot of money, it's still not solve the problem, which is not an option for us. So like, where are we on that thinking now?
I think we'll have a better indication once we get some reports back from the engineers, get a clearer picture.
Okay, so we don't have an answer yet. Okay. Fair enough.
We've heard about mold growing in, for example, the Capitol building, and they said, well, the reason for it is that the pipes from the HVAC are dripping water down in the hallways. Mold is growing. If we had that, we solve it very easily.
Exactly.
This one is just, was it a perfect storm that caused what happened? Was it a perfect storm back in 1992 that caused what happened? Will it happen again? I mean, I'm not sure we're going to come up with 100% definitive, someone will stand behind solutions to this. But we've got people who are willing to put guarantees on products and guarantees on their work to say it should work and will guarantee labor and product. And
I think as a board, our challenge is that add that up to enough certainty to make the financial commitments and send students on site, which are both of which have certain risks and requirements that we have to be very cognizant of. So,
I mean, for me, what's most reassuring is that we had a moisture issue for many, many years without a mold issue. So I'm hopeful that, in fact, this is a situation of extraordinary circumstance. That's the reason the State House got into trouble. That's the reason the Tunbridge School got into some trouble on mold. So I'm hopeful.
So I think it is.
okay.
All right, Jennifer, Jim, Matt, Matt's first, or Matt?
I'll keep a seat.
Good to see you.
All right, so I'm going to, board, can you just turn around, everybody turn around. I'm going to ask Maggie, can you try? All right, so those of you know me in the audience, I'm Matt Stover, I'm a board member of Woodstock. So I guess just as a preface to this conversation, why is the finance committee talking about it? We're talking tonight because we need to pass the budget in March, right? And so if you back up where we are in that process, we need to get some pretty clear direction on budget parameters literally this month. We've got some big decisions on really big numbers that should go into the budget or not into the budget so that we can finalize the shape of that budget, because that needs to be delivered to us next month as a board. So we can look at it over the holidays, vote on it in January, get it warned in February, and then vote on it in all the towns, the town meeting in March. And so that is why if we back up the calendar, we actually have to make some decisions on some rather big numbers. And so that's the essence of why we're having this finance discussion tonight, and why it's going to finance that. Next slide, Matt.
So Matt, just to step up on that, it's not just numbers, it's outcomes.
Exactly. Yep, exactly. So really three parts of this conversation tonight for you guys. One is just the starting position, the context, the pathology, to use one of the words from the audience. Like, what is our starting situation? What are some of the reasons why it's happening? And where do we really want to get to as we think about the context of finance with school, right? And especially driving toward the educational outcomes we want to invest in. And then the second thing is just what we heard, obviously, from the community here over the last couple of meetings, but also outside the meetings. Lots of feedback to us as board members, and we distilled some of that here. And then a set of 3 recommendations for us to consider as a board, and we'll talk about those and vote on those in turn, making pretty specific recommendations. But I guess first, just to pull back on the financial and educational context. And to start this conversation, I think we're just going to have to dive off the deep end a little bit into a little bit of the tax math of what it looks like for us. And so, like, our job as a board, and our job as the finance committee on that board is to help us make decisions on allocations, right? So we are essentially spending money as a school district to invest in our kids' education. So how do we make the trade-offs of that? Where do we try to save money? Where do we invest? And how much do we ask the taxpayers to fund this for? And so I guess the first constraint that we deal with is kind of the tax implications. When you talk to the voter on the street, you're like, what's my tax bill going to be? And so that's kind of the first question that we always get asked. So the next slide, Maggie. So just a little bit jumping off the deep end of the tax math. And if you just take our budget today and roll it forward and say we do nothing, no changes to our budget. We leave the classroom sizes as is. We don't do any of the recommendations that are in the packet today. What actually happens to our tax rates in our budget? So, this is just a really cartoon figure of the tax math into the main drivers. But basically, if you think about what drives your tax rate at the end of the day, you got your budget, how much we're spending, right? You've got to divide that by your equalized pupils, our enrollments, so how many kids are in our school. That gives you the cost per student, so it's just, these two numbers divided. We'll talk about the spending penalty in a little bit, right? But basically, you take the cost per student, you divide it by a number that the state gives you, and that gives you your tax rate. We have a merger incentive, which is being reduced, which we got last year, which is being reduced, and therefore you have your tax rate. And we have changes in almost all of these this year. So if you just take our budget and roll it forward to next year, no changes. What does that mean just given the inflation in our budget, right? So that's about $685K, right? Almost $750,000 and a $20-odd million budget, just given the underlying inflation of our cost structure, which is mostly salaries and healthcare, right? And so that is kind of what is normally always present in our budget, and that's inflating, right? We actually got a spot of good news this year in our enrollment. So if you look over the past 10 years, our enrollment has dropped about 2 points a year, every single year. This year, like if you just look at this year, we've had an increase in enrollment in the high school, right? Which is fabulous news for the district, so the word is getting out. We've got something good going on here. But that's averaged over 2 years. There's lots of complicated math to get the equalized pupil number back to make it real. The state said they're going to get it to us sometime in December. I think we can probably plan on flat enrollment, which is actually a change from the past 10 years, which is really, really good news, right? But if you basically take our increase in budget, divide by the number of kids we have, just 900 some kids that employs people, that's about $837 per kid in increase. Now, the way the state tax formula works is they basically set a cap, a spending cap per child. They don't want you to go over. Right? Our budgets have typically run very close to that cap, but not over that cap. And what happens when you hit that spending cap, you're charged 2 for 1 every dollar that you go over that cap. So we're about, you can say, we're about $500, please Richard, you can nod. We're about $500 per student in spending costs from the cap. If we go $837 up, we're $300 over the spending cap, so that's an additional $300 per kid we got to spend. That's going into our tax rate. We got merger incentives for merging Act 46. They descend over time, so last year in our budget we got 8 cents. This year it's 6 cents, next year it's 4 cents, next year it's 2 cents. So in a sense we have an automatic budget increase every year because we bake that savings into our budget. Our incentive is reducing. So the bottom line is 14-cent tax increase if we do nothing, right? So that is about a little under 10% of what our tax rate is now. $100,000 value of a house, $40, right? But a 10%-ish increase is pretty significant, right? And being over the spending cap would be a really new phenomenon in the majority of the towns in this district. A really new phenomenon, and I think very, very high risk of getting an actual budget passed with the voters. Okay. Next slide. So the question, we don't know what Prosper is going to cost yet. And I think that's part of the challenge, and part of it, you'll see how we're addressing it in our recommendations. But you just say, if we wanted to solve it next year, bake it into our budget without a bond, right? Just bake that, let's just put $500,000 in the budget and get it solved and run it through the budget. Look, that just accelerates kind of the problem that we're in, right? We had $500,000 in the 685, we're up to 1.85 million budget increase. That just cascades through the formula, really getting us into the penalty phase. It's an accelerant on the tax increase. And that would put us up a quarter, which should be up 20%, right, on our existing budget. Right, so I think the job of this board is to balance the investments we need to make in our kids, kind of with the reality that we do likely have some very real financial constraints on being able to pass a budget, given that our starting position is so close to the penalty zone, and that's kind of a mental hurdle for most voters. Okay. Next slide, thanks. So just some context behind that. This is tax rates over time from 2012 to 2019 in all of our towns. And so just to get a picture of a little bit of the pressure that is on keeping the tax rates sustainable, essentially every town but Reading, if you back out the incentive we got last year, we've had pretty substantial tax increases on a run rate basis over the past 7 years, right? So this would say, just in our district, Woodstock, for example, so we were at $1.66 last year. That included the 8-cent incentive. So if you just back that out, we went from $1.48 in 2012 to $1.74 in 2019. And then on these, just so you know, I backed out the COA, so they're all equivalent. So we essentially all pay the same tax rate now, right? That's the whole purpose of Act 46. But in all these towns, they've actually experienced pretty significant rate increases, which obviously apply to an inflating base of the taxes have gone up. Okay, next slide. we are expensive as a district, right? And so if you just say, where are we relative to Vermont? You know, this chart represents kind of every little dot on here represents a town in Vermont. This is the tax rate. I just pulled this off the Department of Finance. We are in the top quartile of tax rates for school taxes in Vermont. These are towns in our district right here. Right, so when the voters are going to vote on this, we're going to kind of say, where are we? We are not, you know, we're not one of the cheapest towns or even near the median. Right, we're actually already up here. So, and this is with incentive. A lot of these towns did not have the ASIN incentive last year. Let's get into some of the pathology, why this is.
Could you just go back to that slide for a second? Where do the towns that are in the top 5 of the state educationally fall in this tax bracket?
It's not necessarily correlated.
Okay.
Not necessarily correlated. I'll look up Stowe for you after this and find out.
Okay.
It's not necessarily correlated that the highest spending towns
That's
have
my
the highest
question.
results.
Does
I've checked that in the past. It is not correlated.
Okay.
That's a question. Does free CLA mean that it has nothing to do with real estate?
It has nothing to do with just back out CLA, so it's like for like. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because CLA confuses everything. So, again, I'm replaying some of the greatest hits that we went through as a board earlier this year, guys. If you just benchmark our cost per student as a district against other the other supervisory unions across Vermont, the latest data we have is from 2016, 2017. But on almost every single dimension we benchmark ourselves against Vermont, we are one of the higher spending districts. So this is instructional cost per kid. We're not wildly expensive on instructional costs, but we're certainly at the top end of the second quartile. On admin costs per kid, we're one of the most expensive districts in the state on our admin costs per kid. Infrastructure costs per kid, we are again one of the highest spending districts in the state. And so if you think about some of the pathology that is driving like those tax rates and the costs at the top, this is exactly why. Right? We just have a lot of cost that's embedded in our district. Next slide. If you de-average this by campus, and I think this is someone asked the question, what is equity, right? So the Brigham decision said equity was dollars spent per kid. If you look at our district, dollars spent per kid by campus, by the number of the budget that's delivered at the campus, by the number of kids at that campus, we actually have a significant disparity in our district. So moving from Woodstock with a little under 14 grand, Killington, 14 and a half, Reading, a little under 17, Prosper Valley, almost 18 grand. 30% difference from top to bottom in $1 per kid investment. Right? So that's significant differences in $1 per kid basis on what we're investing. Right? Next slide. If you talk about, this is driven mostly by staff costs, as we talked about before. So, two ways to compare that. What are the teachers, the student-teacher ratio, the teachers that we're investing in our kids? And what's the staff cost, the staff that we're investing in our kids in our building? Again, very significant differences if you look at the elementary school campuses in our district from top to bottom, right? So this one is the student-teacher ratio, kindergarten through 6th grade. This is the student-to-staff ratio, kindergarten through 6th grade. So starting from the left, same chart as before, we have a student-teacher ratio of a little over 10. In Woodstock, this includes all the specials, et cetera. Going down to a student-teacher ratio, so this is number of students per one teacher of 7.5 in Prosper, right? So very, very big difference, almost a 50% difference between the highest student-teacher ratio in Killington and our lowest in Prosper. Add staff on top of that, because if you have a small school, you've got to have staff to man the desk, to manage the school, have to be in the building. Same story. 44% difference between our highest scale school and our smallest scale school. Literally, one staff member for every 5 students, right? Our smallest schools. So our infrastructure and our campus configuration are driving really different investments in how we think about investment against our kids. Next slide, please. I had a lot of questions about, if you look at those ratio numbers, what's the lived experience in the classroom, right? So I have a kindergartner or first grader. They have a teacher and they're in the room with 20 other kids. I don't care about the specials, etc. What does it actually look like today? We have wildly different experiences for the kids across our district, right? So this is just, we decided to call it a homeroom, right? So, the base camp where the kids are, what does that classroom look like in the number of the peers that are with them against one teacher in that classroom? We tried to do the best we could to average it out. And so this is in Woodstock, all the different classrooms. From kindergarten, we have combined 3rd and 4th graders, we've combined 5th and 6th graders in rotation. But in Woodstock alone, we have some classrooms which are 13, some classrooms which are 26. Billington, we range from 10 to 18. Reading classroom, 10 to 16, very, very different. Prosper Valley, 8 to 12. But look at the difference between this campus, which is sitting at an average of 10, and this campus, which is sitting at an average of 18. Very, very different experiences for our kids. Very different. And I would say, educationally, this kind of structure makes it really difficult to deliver consistency for education. Just look at all the different configurations we have by grade. We have standalone grades, 1st and 2nd, combined classrooms, 3rd and 4th, 5th and 6th. We have 1 through 3s together in Killington. Over here we have K1s, 2 through 4, 5, 6, and then we have standalone grades again. Very, very different by campus, very different number of kids beneath those teachers, therefore very, very hard to deliver consistently against those kids. Next slide. And I guess just to pull back, we had this slide a couple weeks ago, Ralph was presenting it. The objective of our investment of dollars against these kids is to produce outcomes, right? And so I would just make the observation that we really have room to improve. Like we got, good performance in most of our elementary schools, room to improve. But I would say as we think about where all our kids funneled into, we have real gaps. And this is where I start to get emotional. I'm not going to, but I mean, to have less than half of our high schoolers, less than half of our high schoolers be proficient in math is kind of an unacceptable outcome to me, especially given the resources that we're investing in these kids.
Do we, of course, we want to see all of these numbers increase, but do we have what these are in comparison to numbers in the state of Vermont and in the country proficiency levels, just to give kind of some perspective on, okay, these are our numbers, but these are Vermont's numbers, and these are the country's numbers?
Yeah, Ralph probably is probably the best person.
Yeah.
I would say, look, Mary Beth was we're good, not great, right? And so if you look at our numbers across Vermont, and they haven't released the numbers for this year yet on a longitudinal basis across the Vermont schools. But if you look at last year, we're kind of in the top quartile of Vermont. Different by grade, but there are, but for example, I guess my benchmark, I feel like, is always kind of Stowe, or our community should be able to deliver exactly the same results as those guys. If you look at their high school, they're in the high 70s on math, right? There's no reason we shouldn't be able to deliver.
Oh, no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying you should definitely be higher enough. I just was wondering.
No, exactly. Great question. So I think, look, for me and for the finance committee, there's lots of places we want to invest. And I think we're going to be generating more places where we want to invest in our kids. Right? So we just talked about profile the graduate. That is going to drive a whole lot of how coming out of the what we just talked about. A whole lot of how. What we want to invest against. We've got a strategic plan that has just started. We have a campus plan that we want to develop. The middle school, high school plan is already out there. That is already, who knows what the number is going to be, but it's a $10, $20 million plus price tag. Right? So it is not a matter of cutting. It is a matter of making room for investments. Right? So that's the way I would position it. We have to invest against initiatives which are going to drive outcomes for all the 1,000 kids in our district. Next slide, thank you. So look, I'll end here on the current context. We're between a rock and a hard place. I mean, as you remember my slide from the beginning of the year, like the current budget, run rate budget, and the tax, and where we are in the tax math is a really hard starting position to be in. And so, to us, in the finance committee, like the do nothing scenario where you just kind of let the momentum take you is a pretty non-starter scenario. We have to make some choices that are going to change the trajectory of this. And if we want to make investments, we have to change the underlying. And this is in a context, right? So this do nothing scenario is in a context where we're already one of the most expensive districts in the state, right? It's not like we've been cheaping out for years.
So Stowe is at $1.54. Okay, their actual tax rate is $1.52. That's probably what this is.
Okay. So if you think about ours, which is $1.66, right? And we have yeah, that's if you back out the incentive, right? If you back out the incentive, Stowe didn't get the merger incentive, so the like-for-like comparison is $1.74 compared to $1.55. That's Stowe, right? So I would just say this is in a context where we're not skinflint here, right? We've totally been spending. I would just question whether we're spending in the right spots, right? So we have really, really different investment levels against our kids, both from a dollar perspective, from a teacher perspective, from a staff perspective, from an infrastructure perspective. And, the question was asked, what is equity? I mean, there's a lot of arguments on both sides for sure, right? But I would just say we have 1,000 kids to invest in across this district. So how do we deliver the best outcomes for most kids is this choice we're going to have to make, right? And so I think we have a lot of room to improve student performance. We have to invest behind that. So as we go into the next section, I would just leave this as the context, right? Between a rock and a hard place, the status quo, we are not cheap already, so it's not, I would say it's very risky to try to pass the budget. It just says fund everything. Therefore, we got to make choices to deliver the best for our kids. So I'll stop there.
Okay.
Good question before I...
Can I just make one comment, though? In our student outcomes, is that I also think that, yes, we have to reinvest in how we're educating and our children, but I also want to say we have to change our mindset a little bit. It's not just the responsibility of the teachers to get good test results. It's the responsibility of the parents, our community members, and our kids to also be engaged in those classrooms to get those results. And we have to stop blaming the teachers for poor test results solely, because I think it's really unfair of us to do that as board members and as parents. We have to change our mentality. Our kids have to be engaged in the classrooms as well. And they have to start, what was that thing? We were self-motivating themselves as well, because teachers are not taking the tests. The kids are taking the tests. And our parents have to start supporting our kids early on as well as our community members, as well as fellow students, as well as the teachers. It's not just one individual who's going to get those test scores up. It's going to take the entire community within the educational system to get the test scores up. That's just my little spiel tonight. I'm done.
Hey, are we allowed to ask questions?
No.
You can ask me.
Okay.
After that.
Thank you. For those of you I don't know, my name is Jennifer Antoni. I'm a board member from Killington on the Finance Committee. So to give some, thank you, Matt, for giving us some context to this, so that you understand what we have done in the last 2 weeks before coming back to you. This is what we do in November and December. In our December meeting, we will come to you with a budget. So these months are spent trying to figure out, as a finance committee, what our investments, what the priorities for investments are going to be, and then looking, okay, what's the reality? You know, what are we going to bring forward from this year? What were some expenses we hadn't accounted for, and taking a look at what our proposed tax rate would be without the investments, and then making choices and bringing choices to you. So in the last 2 weeks, we've met as a finance committee. We've met with Richard. There have been endless calls, and with Mary Beth, trying to figure out, listening to what you said, what the community said, what we said as a result of our last work session, where we talked about, okay, what do we want to look, what do we want these campuses to look like for next year? So things we heard loud and clear, just so that you know where these proposals are coming from, you know, how we came to this thought process. I want to give you some feedback on what we heard you say, and then sort of some background research and why some of those proposals or some of those ideas didn't have the same meat that we had hoped they might when we all left the planning. Thank you. Okay, so we definitely heard loud and clear that we have great passion around having local campuses and keeping communities engaged, understanding that the local schools are the heart of the town. We came away hearing that we want something for the Prosper Valley campus, and we want to figure out what that something is. We're not exactly sure what it looks like. We had ideas of a potential 4, 5, 6 there. I'll talk about that in a minute. We heard passion from the board members in the community about a use for that building. Not quite sure what that use is just yet. A desire, certainly, we have heard for consolidation savings from the Act 46 merger. As you can see, not many towns are seeing it. So, you know, that is always on our mind. A need for a real plan to be thoughtful about the renovation and consolidation decisions. Certainly, I think you would all agree we did not have the information we needed last meeting to make any decision on what a renovation would cost at Prosper, what the outcome would be, a timeline, and as we can see from Richard tonight, that's still very much in the works. And although we all want this done yesterday, it was handed to us a couple days before school started. And so we're doing the best that we can. Richard and Joe are certainly doing the best that they can. But to spend money without a plan is not responsible, and I'm sure none of us would engage in that. So we really need to put together a thoughtful and responsible plan. We certainly heard a desire for more community engagement before making any permanent decisions. And finally, a desire for increased transparency on the process and decision making. And again, we are doing the best that we can so you can really understand, you know, what the Finance Committee is doing and talking about. I want to just comment on the 4, 5, 6. You know, when we left these tables at the last meeting and came away saying, well, that would be a good idea. We could put all the 4th, 5th, and 6th graders at the Prosper Valley School. And it is not that that idea is done. It's very much alive, but it
when we look at what that actually looks like for this coming school year, the budget, the F20 budget that we are working on now, the idea, if the $450,000 to $500,000 is the approximate amount to remedy the problem, if the engineering reports come back and say, yes, this can be done for between $450,000 and $500,000, even if all that lined up and we put it out to a bond, it is very unlikely that work could be done, the planning, when we talk to Mary Beth as the person to put that, that's a radically different change from what we have right now, having an early elementary campus, a main early elementary campus, and a main 4, 5, 6 building. Those are really new concepts for this district. We could do it, but we want to do it well. And we are certainly hearing from administration that that is not something that can be done in a 6-month time period. That the staffing of it, the building, even if we did the work, the building, if we did the actual work on the building as is, the building would need to be renovated, to be reconfigured for such a classroom setting. So really the money behind doing that immediately is really not available. And as you can see from Matt's slides, if we made the decision to incorporate those changes in our present budget, I can't imagine there's anyone here who thinks a 26-cent increase is a responsible way, that our taxpayers at all would support that. And I think a 14-cent increase is going to be very difficult for taxpayers to support. And so I think we need to be realistic, and I certainly hear, I've heard the community concerns tonight about making decisions about our children commodities. Certainly not. But, part of all of our jobs is to balance and to make choices. And we do have a set amount of money. Money does not grow on trees. We must live within our means, and we have to make choices. And the next budget, the next meeting that we come to will be to talk about what are some investments we can make, and what do we need to make. We were talking all about the elementary schools here. What investments do we need to make in the high school? And that'll be part 2 of this presentation. So after reflecting on really working with Richard on the numbers and really coming together for work sessions, we have come up with some recommendations. And really this is a starting point, because then it gets us with these, if you give us this, this direction, then we come up with a budget to present to you, to continue to dissect and to discuss. But this, gives us some general direction. If you could do the next slide, thank you. So the decisions tonight and the 3 recommendations that are coming from the Finance Committee, there are 3 of them. First is to commit to the Prosper campus. But in order to do this, all of us feel very strongly that we will not be able to pass a bond and really get community support unless there is a real plan for that campus. And I don't know exactly what the plan is for the campus. I'm not sure what the best thing is. I think we have lots of creative people. We have lots of wonderful ideas that we've heard tonight and over the last several weeks. But we need to really dive into that. And to do that in a couple weeks is just not going to happen. And so what we would suggest is to commit to Prosper and to launch a holistic campus planning and funding process. This means setting up a committee, would be a short-term committee in a year term, where it would be made up of there would be board members, community members, administration, parents, and staff. And we would really look at all campus investments. Prosper, the middle and high school. These will require substantial investments and bond funding. Might there be a change? Might it be a 7th and 8th grade building? I mean, there's sort of a lot of potential for it, but might it be a STEM center for all the students in the district? I sort of could go on about the potential, But we need a group of people who are really going to dive deep into this and really do the work necessary to pass a bond if we think this is the right thing to do. So we would propose to launch this committee, as soon as if the direction came from the board tonight, really to start this right away. So in December, we would have, proposed members for this committee and really to get this going. So that will be the first decision, and we'll go through each of these so that we can discuss them as a board, but that'll be the first recommendation. The second recommended vote will be to integrate Prosper Valley and West classes starting fall of 2009. Obviously, when we were so rushed and everybody was taken aback by what happened to Prosper, the classes, it was just decided West would absorb them and it would be a school within a school. But we have heard over and over from various stakeholders that the integration is really key. And so the idea would be for this upcoming year, we know we would not be back in that Prosper building. That would be the year to plan what we're going to do with that building. But we would integrate the classes for this next school year. Given the time needed for planning, community engagement, and the rebuilding using the Prosper campus before next fall is not realistic. Okay, so that will be number 2 that we'll talk about. The third recommended vote for tonight will be to commit to the Reading primary pre-K through 3 campus. We would integrate 4th, 5th, and 6th grade into the Prosper Valley West students here the fall of 2019. It would be an opportunity for us as a district to develop innovative, effective, and sustainable primary campus configurations. It would be an opportunity for more effective use of educational resources with larger class sizes and best educational and best developmental. There was a discussion, would the 4th graders go to, would just the 5th and 6th graders go? And really, our direction is coming from the principal, from the administration, that the natural academic break point, if you will, for students, the natural break is that you keep pre-K through 3 together in 4, 5, 6. If you leave that 4th grade, everybody really talks that that's not in the kids' best interest. Okay, thank you. This is a slide that piggybacks on Matt's earlier slide that shows what a homeroom, and when we say a homeroom, it means like your main class teacher. What these homeroom class sizes, you remember the slide Matt showed, and the real disparity between the campuses. This shows what the projected classroom sizes could be with this proposed reconfiguration. So it shows Woodstock, Prosper Valley, Reading, 4, 5, 6 together. You see you get more, more sustainable numbers in the 18 and 19. Killington, and then the early, and then the pre-K through 3 in Reading.
Just a comment on this. You really start to get a huge amount of flexibility once you get enough kids to have 2 sections of a grade in the campus. I think part of the challenge we all have now is that we have either not enough or slightly too many kids in a grade, right, in a campus. And therefore, like literally every year, we struggle to figure out what the configuration is where we can align the teachers to the grades we have, because we have 6 kids in one grade and 15 kids in the next grade up. So how do we actually deal with that in an equitable way, right? And so when you're able to get 30 kids of a grade, and you can have 2 sections of a grade which are very reasonable sizes, and it gives you tons of flexibility into thinking about how you deliver educationally to those kids. And that's what you start getting at a combined campus, just a lot more flexibility to deliver the education. And this reduces the number of combined classrooms by 50%, right, that we have before.
Ask, is the Killington 1 through 3 2 classrooms the current configuration? Or is that
It's 2 teachers. There's one anomaly class, which is small. small. So it sort of, that class sort of bounces back between the first grade teacher and the third grade teacher during second grade. Okay, next please. So just sort of a recap on the budget impact. If we do nothing, and remember, do nothing means only make the contractual obligation investments, okay, making nothing extra. We have a increase of $685,000. If we integrate Prosper Valley into West this year, we would have a savings of almost $400,000. If we integrated 4, 5, and 6 from Reading into Woodstock and Prosper Valley, an additional savings of $210,000. We still have a net remaining increase in the budget of $77,000. And this is the next work that the budget committee will take on. You know, that's our next job, figure out what investments need to be made in the elementary schools, in the middle and high school, and take a look at this $77,000, see what else we can tighten up. Yeah.
That 685 is contractual, that's...
Health insurance and teachers' raises.
How does that compare? That's obviously a very large number.
12% health insurance.
How does that compare to previous years?
Well,
Let's say last year.
I was going to say, remember, it's hard. This is only our second year with a combined budget. I mean, are you asking, like, how does health insurance increase? That 12% is huge compared to other years. The highest I remember is a 10% increase.
We had 8% last year.
8% last year. You know, traditionally it's more around 4%. Jim?
So, sitting on the finance committee for the previous board, okay,
For the middle and high school.
for the middle and high school, but then looking at, I mean, what this is really doing is it's multiple years of that. We've always stayed underneath that per pupil penalty phase. We are now finally at the point where it's going to be where we will go over, and just as many people that are here that are saying school is school and there's not a limit to it, there are a lot of people in our towns that don't have children in school and on the other side. So the boards have always felt that if we go much higher and go into the penalty phase, we may not get a budget through. When it comes to March, when we put a budget in, if it fails, then there's a whole process. And it could take 3 months to get another vote up, because you have to do, well, you would have to go back to it. So that's why the board is doing this.
But yeah, I mean, the question in the, it's a little hard because it's only our second year, so this number, you know, I mean, these would be all smaller budgets, you know, feeding into this one. But yeah, the health insurance is huge this year. I mean, 12% is huge. Paige is working very hard to get a combined contract, and there's been a lot of challenges in that, in getting all the teachers on the same pay schedule, on the same salary grid, and that's expensive to do, very expensive to do.
This doesn't include, there's not an assumption of bond.
No, there's nothing.
And at this point, there's no additional dollars for
No investment.
remediation.
Oh, no, the 685 is nothing for Prosper and no educational investments. Yeah.
So bear with me, but this is from merging of positions, correct? The savings from these two items.
The savings. Why don't we go through, can you speak to that, Mary Beth, please, the savings, where those, or Richard, where that comes from?
I can give an overview, and then Richard, if you want to kind of jump in here as well. So what we see happening when we integrate is that we're able to go down to classroom teaching positions. We anticipate being able to go down about 3 classroom positions. We are able to consolidate special subjects. So we're not running as many sections of classrooms, so we don't need as much special subject time. When we're looking at making running Prosper Valley and West combined and shrinking Reading Elementary School, we can start looking at administrative structures and some savings around administration that go into that. So those 3 big buckets around, again, classroom teachers, special subject teachers, and administration, that's where the savings is coming from.
I think it's public knowledge at this point that Reading's principal is leaving. this factor in that we get a full, so the first, second item, does this factor in that we're hiring a full-time replacement? Are we sharing administrative costs? Has that been factored into this at all?
So at this point, what we would anticipate is that we would be going down administrative positions. What the actual structure would look like if we're running a pre-K, K1, 2, 3, 3 classrooms, we would need to do some thinking around that in terms of what it would look like structure-wise.
This presentation, first off, is incredibly professional and really well done, so thank you. I appreciate the finance committee doing this. I will say this, like, we look at these problems and, they're very hard to solve. We're just nibbling around the edges here, and even when we're talking about big numbers, we're not changing the model. And I would say this, at some point, the conversations we have to be, how do we make real investments in the middle school? Because it's a draw. It's the thing that gets somebody to move to Reading because their kids can go to Woodstock. The problem we have right now is if you visit the Woodstock Middle School, High School, you kind of walk away and you're like, there's some really good teachers, and there are, but that whole facility doesn't look the same. And at some point, that's the problem we absolutely have to tackle. We're not in a financial position to do it. We've got to have some big thoughts on that. And then the second thing is, when we're cutting positions, one of my concerns is we're going to be cutting good job teachers. And I'm assuming that's kind of how it works because it's how it's working at the other district I've ever been in. It's a painful and difficult because you're getting rid of like the young one that's kind of pushing innovation. Not that older teachers are trouble teachers, but it's really hard when you're cutting this. And so I appreciate this, and I think we have very few good choices but at some point, we as a community can truly take that side of the lines.
Can I just piggyback on what Lou just mentioned? I just, based on some of the other earlier charts, the teaching costs, that even though they're higher in the, what you say, the upper end of the profile, it wasn't the big driver. The big driver was administration costs and facility costs. Those are kind of where we start. So just keeping that in mind during this consolidation or during any consolidation in the years to come, that's not where we're suffering as much as other places.
You need to speak up louder.
I just wanted to bring up that the teaching cost is not the highest. And the three things that we were shown earlier, the administrative costs and the building costs were the higher too. So if we're making any kind of consolidation efforts over the next couple of years, that's really taken into consideration. That the teachers are not where it lays so much.
And I think that's exactly the point, right? Is that if we make smart decisions on campus configuration, we actually have more room to invest teaching resources against the kids. Right now we're constrained because every time we have little pockets, you got to invest in buildings to house them and admin to run that facility, right? And just a lot of wasted windshield time if you talk about specials, et cetera, right? And so there's real opportunity here to invest more, I would say.
Additional just
I would just hope that if we explore the integration of REST, TPVS, and WES 4 through 6, that we don't stop there, that we continue down the track of what is an intermediary school and have these classes pilot a program, what is it, 3 floors up, if that's where they land. I think, my youngest daughter from Bridgewater could potentially move 3 or 4 times in our 6 years of schooling, 7 years of schooling. And she's doing great. Each time she lands is in a better spot. And I think we're talking about structure, we're talking about buildings and admin. We also need to talk about identity and having a community just fold into another one feels rushed, doesn't feel like the best plan. But having communities come together to form something really incredible, that gets me excited. That makes me want to move again. So.
Well, and that's where, that's where we're coming up with this committee to really fully explore what those options are for the Prosper Valley campus.
Yeah, just as long as that committee works fast, because
yes.
The building,
absolutely,
Prosper sitting empty will cost something. Yes. So the longer that we're spending on an empty building, this doesn't feel right either. So.
Should you want to move to the choice per choice?
Okay, so I mean we can discuss, but let's take a look. So this is the first proposed vote where we do holistic campus planning, and we can continue this discussion if we can get somebody to move this vote.
I'll make a motion to approve the holistic campus planning number 1.
Shall the board establish a committee to develop a plan for the campus in our district to include campus configuration, investment and renovation plan, financing plan, community engagement, and citizen voting?
So we have a second on the floor. Second. Thank you, Karen.
So let's talk about this. As I said, Paige and I would come up with, if this gets okay tonight, we're talking about it tonight, tomorrow morning, coming up with this committee right away. And just as you said, Justin, this is a committee that needs to start work yesterday. I think, there will be input and partnership with Richard and Joe as to the building, but this is the committee that's looking at the trajectory of the building, and then what are the potential opportunities. Yes, Jim?
So who would be on this board? Who are we looking for?
On a committee.
On a committee.
On this committee.
So on this subcommittee, I think it's really imperative that we have community members from various communities, not just Pomfret and Bridgewater, who it affects the kids only, but have a wider reach of community members and parents involved. I think that what we'll do is Jennifer and I, if you're interested in sitting on this committee, that you should send us an email and tell us that you're interested, because I think the wider breadth of people thinking at the table is better. I'd like to see some teachers and administrators, as well as board members, and we will have a chair who is a board member who leads the kind of the conversation, at least, so it's structured so that it's.
So with that
Yeah.
scope that you just gave, how many people do you see on this committee?
I don't know, Jennifer and I have to sit down and see what the interest is. Karen, wait, hold on, Karen had her hand up.
So if we have time to do this, why are the other 2 options still on the table? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, if we have time to reevaluate all of it with a committee, are the other 2 options at the same time? I'm just a little unsure.
Like, we don't have time, right? I guess we need to deliver a budget this year, vote in March. Right. And so if we don't take any money out of the budget, we're in penalty phase, even leaving aside the cost for rebuild, right? So the other 2 options really get us not to even, but a little closer, right? And we do also need to make a decision, what do we do with Prosper kids next year? And we've been talking about giving certainty to Reading for, since we started this board, right? And so, I think they are decisions we should make now at the same time. Sure.
Well, I would throw in that by voting on this, this is what I'm hearing from the community people saying, do not rush. We need to have the numbers in front of us. Okay? So by saying that, and we've already heard multiple times, that there's not a possible way, we don't believe there's a possible way of opening Prosper for this next year. That's what I'm hearing from the administration. Okay? So one of the other votes that we have following up is integrating Prosper into Woodstock for the upcoming year, while this group is working on figuring out.
So we're not just voting, we're voting on each one individually.
Correct.
It's not one or the other.
Bob?
Paige, we have a 21st century school committee now that's looking at the middle high school renovation build new project. I'm not completely clear whether that's firmly
Jennifer
part of
and
this
I
effort.
are reevaluating our committees right now, because some have not done the work that we expected them to maybe work on over the last year and a half. Others have. And so in December, we will present new committees and what their focus is on. This will probably mesh into that campus config. we're calling it a campus configuration committee. But the first project is we need to look at what are we going to do here. It may roll into what your questioning is, middle school, high school as well. That may be part of the conversation. Sam, you had your hand up.
I think Jim touched upon it. I was just clarifying. I think we're voting on this basically to make a plan for 2020, while the other two are to just get a budget for 2019, right?
Yeah, and more than just for 2020, to figure out what to do.
Or
What opportunity can we,
exactly.
how can we use that building best?
Yeah.
And if we're going to present to the voters a bond, what is our plan for that bond?
Just following on Bob's question, I guess, I think Barb needs a little clarity on if the middle school, high school is a part of this or not, or if this is just elementary, in order to know if we should, if it's appropriate for us to vote on number 1. Obviously, we would not vote on number 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should include the middle school, high school for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
What else?
I would like to go back, if you can, to Jennifer's first page. If you don't remember which one, I'll tell you when to stop. I thought you had something else right there. Okay. So the substantial passion around local campuses, what I would really like to hear from, because what I hear out of the community is that, we all want to save our schools and our towns or whatever. But as a district, we do have Plymouth, we do have Bridgewater, that already have schools that have, we do have those two that had schools that have given their schools up for a different choice for education, not just for and then we have Pittsfield that has always been school choice.
Well, they had a joint school year ago.
84.
Yep.
Okay, so long ago I wasn't even there. All right, I always thought it was school choice.
They did.
But I would like to hear from those 3 towns then, I keep on hearing, the school is our town, and I believe that in a way, but I would like to hear from our board members, how do they feel after? And we hear if you don't have a school, your population is going to go down. Well, did your population go down in Bridgewater? Did your population go down in Pittsfield?
Your Pittsfield school population has only risen over the last 15 years.
Did it go down in Plymouth?
Last year.
Okay. Yeah. So, that's stuff that I would like to hear from those towns while we're doing this. That's all.
Justin or Ray, do you want to comment? Either of you want to comment?
It's definitely an emotional roller coaster. I think the community is as tight as ever in Bridgewater, and I don't think there's a gaping hole in the community. I am shocked that, in these charts we're seeing, when Bridgewater and Pomfret came together, we were solving this enrollment issue together, and we arrived at one of the most cost-effective per pupil. And in the span of 3 years, suddenly we're back to the same problems we had 3 years ago. So I am really, really scared. I'm glad to hear the middle school, high school enrollment went up. I wasn't aware of that. I'm really looking at the class size numbers. Who's moving into these towns to backfill these elementary campuses? So I'm shocked it's been a snap in 3 years. I can't believe we're still dealing with it. I think we need significant structural change to get people moving here again.
Right.
Really, I've been on the board 10 years, but I haven't had a school to deal with, so, but Pittsfield has increased our children going to school. We've gone from 61 to about 81, and then we're at 72 this year. So it comes and goes. People move into town as renters, so Pittsfield can come and go. But we're up, a significant amount, 15%.
That's pre-K
child
through 12?
population. Yeah, it's K-12. They're all together.
K-12 or pre-K-12?
Why are you guys
K-12, not pre-K.
Why are you guys up?
Well, I mean, really, if you wanted to look at the ski industry in Killington is on kind of a rising pattern. This area has come up quite a bit since I've moved here about 15 years. It's not nowhere near the same area that it is now. The mountain itself.
There are rental opportunities in Pittsfield, and you can go to Killington.
Oh, yeah, we're a
There aren't
choice
those
town.
rental opportunities in Killington.
So you would say people moved in for that, but when I talk with people, they're really, there aren't too many who moved in for that specifically. So it's a community. I mean, Pittsfield's a nice place to live, just like all our towns are nice. And I don't know why we've had a higher increase than some of the other towns.
Can we invite Bob into the conversation too? Because even though the structure didn't change, the identity changed. The Pomfret School ceased to exist. So, I mean, it's a little different spin, but it's still, the school as they knew it ceased to exist. So,
Yeah, kind of crazy. It's nice to hear about towns that don't have schools, but I don't know what the point of that is. And no one surrenders their school, and no one wants to. So, I mean, that's the hard part of this. And it's facts. I mean, the town of Pomfret, I think I said this once before, is a direction that probably should have been attempted to be shifted 10 years ago or longer, and that hasn't happened. So we're dealing with the Vermont issue, declining enrollment. That's just fact, and it's sad fact. I think we all thought that we had that moment of solution when we partnered with Bridgewater, and we would see their students, if not in Pomfret, in Bridgewater would hold our numbers up. That hasn't happened. So this is tough stuff. So as much as it's a curiosity, it doesn't make me feel any better to look at kind of where we're at. And in some ways it's a few years late in terms of changing that trajectory. So I think we've got in front of us and having to deal with hard facts. I'm committed to an educational purpose for that campus. If that campus is just far too valuable, we can't. I'm hopeful that our engineers will discover that this is a situation that can be remediated without a large investment. But it's worth it. It's worth the investment to hang on that campus. For a purpose yet, I don't know. So I think as this goes, we made the right decision to combine with Bridgewater. We were seeing combined classes throughout the school. It was never the best situation, and I think we're obviously there again based on numbers. So I think this is just what we're up against.
And Pat, you also.
I agree. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Bob. But it's so hard to think of this as, and I'm not that I'm saying that anyone is, that this is the giving up of a building. This is a community in and of itself. And if were it in any other town, it would be similarly endured. It is the students, it is the staff, it is the campus. It is all of those things together that is a mix that is different from every other mix that's in this district. That's why we made choice, right? But I think what I struggle with a little bit is we created school choice so people would have a choice to go, and now we're going to decrease the choices that where they have to go. And I understand it's a financial thing, but that, I think is something that we can't disregard as something valuable to the people that are sitting here, because that mix of that campus and what that campus has to offer, and the people who have been there long term, and the people that they are mentoring there, and the families that are there are what we are losing if that goes forward. And that, I didn't ask Jennifer, in that committee slide, you have this thing about a public vote. If that comes down to a public vote to not support this campus, we can all say here that we support that it as an educational piece, but if we put it to a public vote not to support that campus, It's people who maybe have not felt what that campus is to the people that it's important to.
But that's our charge, that's the charge of the committee and the charge of the board in creating that experience that the public will rally around, that we want for all of our children.
That's the job of the committee, present to the board, and the board back the decision, what it says, and sell it. That's what it comes down to, on anybody.
Jim, you asked the question of, with regards to Bridgewater and Pittsfield, and you asked about Plymouth. We don't have anybody here for Plymouth, right? There's 2 board spots to Plymouth that are now, one of them was here, I haven't seen him in a long time, right? To me, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that speaks to, the variable here I'm trying to speak to is the geographics of consolidation, right? That we're not all within a 5 square mile radius of each other, right? We're talking about over the Green Mountains, over hills. So people moving to Plymouth to come to middle school and high school in Woodstock seems a lot more far-fetched than moving to a Bridgewater or a Woodstock to go to the middle school and high school, if that makes any sense.
You move the vote?
I'd like to move the vote on this.
I'll second it.
Jennifer, you want to repeat the motion?
Yes. Shall the board establish a committee to develop a plan for the campuses in our district to include campus configuration, investment and renovation plan, financing plan, community engagement, and citizen voting?
We'll do it by a hand vote.
Okay, all those in favor? How many? 16. Tracy, you're?
I don't vote unless there's a
16. All those opposed? Okay. The ayes have it. Okay, so we'll move on to Maggie, if you don't mind the next slide.
So you need a motion, shall the students of TPBS and WES be integrated across grades starting fall 2019? You need to read off the rest of it there in parentheses.
Final location in subsequent years shall be dependent upon the outcome of the campus configuration plan, which we just voted on. I have a second.
Second.
Discussion.
I believe this goes back to the question that Corinne had at the beginning, was do we, what are we voting on each one? If we voted on the first one, which is saying that we are committed to the TPBS
Looking at that building
and looking
and
and getting that going, and that we understand that it's not possible without getting all that other information, that we need to be voting yes on this also for the upcoming year. And as a board, we only vote 1 year at a time, and that's what we will be voting on.
So this is our plan for the students of Prosper Valley while we're doing the campus configuration plan.
And while we keep everything else intact.
Well,
That's a whole separate vote.
Correct, it's
Yeah.
another vote out.
So this vote, this is not, this is just 2019.
this is starting fall 2019. Final location in subsequent years shall be dependent upon the outcome of the campus configuration.
I mean, if you voted yes on the last vote, you're saying that you're committed, and we understand that the school cannot be open next year. So if you vote no on this, then where are they going to go to school?
So I guess the vote no on this would just say we will leave a school in a school, right? And so if you remember that slide we had before was a massive difference in grade configuration, where you're essentially saying we don't want to integrate the classes in the building. We want to teach the kids separately, like they are now. That's essentially what a no vote would be.
Doesn't this also have financial consequences if we say no?
Yeah, exactly. 400 grand instead of this, yeah.
So basically, Matt, like, the motion I made is for this to go through, saying the last. But if we vote no on this, then we're going to have to vote yes or no on the other one also.
No, we can still have a committee, we can still run the schools in the school.
No, I'm saying that we would we need a vote after this. If we vote no, if the majority votes no, then there would have to be a vote of saying, are we is there the understanding if we vote no on this, that it automatically is going to say that Prosper and Bridgewater or TPVS will continue to go to school the same way? That's not clear to me.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
So
I think that's fair, I think that's fair.
Okay.
Do is another vote.
Right.
Further discussion on this?
Close the vote.
Second.
Do you want to?
I just want to remind folks that the assumption here is for the year ahead. There is still a clarification that if, in fact, configuration plan comes out of the committee, it's not put Bridgewater or Prosper Valley kids or Pomfret kids back in that school, then we're going to have to seek a vote of the voters in Pomfret. I know we had the closure protection in the articles, is what I'm trying to remind people of.
Yes.
So as we approach this conversation, we have to.
Absolutely.
Part of the transparency of this process has got to be that we follow the articles of agreement.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And the law. Okay.
Question for you.
Okay. So, I will do a hand vote again. Shall the students of TPVS and West be integrated across grades starting fall 2019? Final location in subsequent years shall be dependent upon the outcome of the campus configuration plan.
And before we vote, who's not voting on this vote?
Field and Warner.
Field or not voting? Okay. All those in favor?
Keep your hands up, please.
Well, everyone's hands up, so
13.
it's 3 last.
All those opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. And now we'll go, I have Maggie up. Next slide, thank you.
So we'll do the same thing. Motion shall the students in grades 4 through 6 of Reading Elementary School be integrated into the common campus and grade configuration of TPVS and West.
Second. Discussion?
Can I just have clarification on the benefits of a 4 through 6 moving versus a 5 through 6? Educational.
Speak to that. Yeah, so what we typically see is primary versus intermediate grade levels, and 4 is typically clustered with 4 through 6 is intermediate. And so if you don't move 4 over, you have a situation where you have primary grades plus 1 intermediate grade, as opposed to having all the intermediate grades go over and having a program set up for the 4 through 6.
So it's more of a social move.
Not just a social move, but in terms of some of the academics, our programming can be impacted as to whether or not a child is a primary age student or an intermediate age student. So having that group move as an intermediate group makes sense both developmentally and educationally.
So some 4th grade students talking to 6th grade.
Not necessarily, but you tend to see is intermediate programming. And so if they stay together, we can do that intermediate programming as opposed to having a primary school with a small number of students that are getting into that intermediate grade. So that from a programming perspective, developmentally, it makes more sense to move them in a cluster.
Thank you.
Mary Beth, can you speak to, when we discussed this at the last meeting 2 weeks ago, we discussed making, what sort of investments we could make in the Reading Elementary School in that pre-K-3 to make that, really to have robust programming. What sort of investments would you suggest in this program?
Yeah, I think that's something that we would obviously want to engage with the Reading community in as well. But one of the places that we do see a consistency across our elementary grades that we currently have in Reading is kind of an innovation space. So that's something that I think that we would want to take a look at. And then working with the folks in Reading, looking at, another example would be currently in for physical education, there's a way to get those back up to like twice a week. There are a number of different things that we can do, but this would be an opportunity, you know, for Reading Elementary folks to talk about, here are some things that I think can really set us apart in the primary program, and working with them to see how we can do that. And so there are some things that we see that there's a gap there at Reading that where we see other types of programming in our other elementary schools would want to close that gap. But then also.
So you mentioned physical education twice a week. Is there something else?
So physical education, we're looking again at the innovation type of spaces that need to be, that could be helpful to be consistent across the district. And then we would want to look at some types of models around, are we sure that we're getting the intervention that we need and that type of thing. So that, you know, if the board votes to go in this direction, that will be one of the next things that we're working on is what does that look like?
And that would be put into the finance committee at our next meeting. That's one of the other costs, or improvements.
Right, that those would be some of the things that I don't think great programming gets built immediately, so we may put some things in place for next year for this budget, and then we may say, okay, going forward, this is going to be another investment. I don't think it's a one-time, it happens now or forget it, but there are some helpful things I think we can do additionally for next year and continue the conversation about how we do that.
Okay. No, Justin.
I think she had numbers.
She's a lady.
Yeah.
So there was some question out of the audience today about maker spaces and how, you know, do children need a dedicated maker space or not? It is my understanding, though, that the other elementary schools within the district, including Barnard, has maker spaces dedicated to primary and intermediate level students to help them achieve. Is that true?
Yes, so at Killington, the space went in this year, at Barnard, the space went in this year. We've had the combination of Prosper Valley and Woodstock, so they have the Innovation Lab. So Reading is the only place currently that does not have a separate lab space. And I would certainly agree with the idea that program isn't always about space, but the quality of the programming that's happening, and certainly doesn't have to just happen in that one location. But, you know, do we be, you know, looking at being sure that all of our students have access to the same types of resources around robotics, around Scratch programming, Spiros, there are a number of different things that
are primary geared?
That all primary programs that we would look at.
Okay.
And talking about how we have that consistency of experience for our students. And that's one area, but that is a place that we see a differential in Reading from the other elementary schools.
Justin.
So I think, Mary Beth, I heard you saying this is the what, and then we're going to hear more about the how. What does the timeline look like for that, so that we can start communicating and take the opportunity to define this model here at West differently than just 4th, 5th, and 6th at West? Is there a timeline to discuss and expand on that?
For an intermediate programming, is that what
For the primary program.
We'll define the how we unroll an excellent primary program. This is our first dip of a toe towards an intermediate program. Can we identify what we can latch onto now as a maybe not a perfect program, but this is a step towards it. Can we structure it as a step towards it? And I know that comes in the how discussion, but do you see, and I guess Paige and Jennifer, do you see opportunity in the next few board meetings to understand how this happens?
So this is a big conversation about what's going to happen. What I would ask for the board is we have a meeting in December 17th. In between this meeting and the December 17th meeting, I have an SLT meeting, which is our leadership team. And what we could do at that point is to build a timeline for you about what we think some of the things that would happen. I think probably the first thing we would want to tackle is some of the logistics. We would have families, I'm sure, that would say, what would a transition look like for my child? So those would be the kinds of things that we would want to put out. And then looking at programming, what's a reasonable timeline to get some of those things built out. But I really would feel the need to speak with our leadership team to talk about capacity, what's reasonable, what priorities we would suggest to the board. So if we could have that time between now and the December 17th meeting to present.
I would just request if the board will agree or disagree, but that identity is part of that.
Absolutely. So I would take that a vote yes on this. Would move this also back to what you're questioning, back to movement number one. That would be the subcommittee, because number one said we would be looking at the whole configuration of the school campuses.
Sure, I could view number one as a 2 to 8 year plan and some stability. I view this vote as a next year plan.
I view this as next year going forward.
Yeah. No, but I agree with, I mean, I'm with you, Justin, that we need to start building, this is all positive from my perspective in terms of our ability to deliver differential outcomes for our kids. And so I'm super excited. The leadership team, if we vote yes, the leadership team now has enough stability to start planning 8 months in advance, a little bit, not a day in advance, right? And so we'll have some time and the team can start working on that, but I'm not sure.
But Justin, I also think there needs to be a second to that, which is community engagement, to find out what traditions, what things are important to families and the community to bring with them and integrate together, because every school has something really incredible that they've done traditionally. My experience here is show your stuff. Why aren't all the communities going to share and show your stuff? The observatory in Pomfret, why aren't all the communities going to share in the trails that you have in Reading and your greenhouse as well? There's a lot of things that I think we should be bringing those characteristics or things that are traditions throughout the year and integrate them so the kids experience all these wonderful traditions. They're not just now one towns or another. They're embracing a lot more traditions, I think, within the year, which I think could be really wonderful. It would add diversity to what we have existing right now. So I would build upon the structure educationally to that too.
And Paige, if I could offer, there's probably some, reluctant expertise, but we have some expertise in our district now of combining schools and what are the lessons learned and how were those communities preserved. I know in Bridgewater and Pomfret came together. There was a lot of good work done to try to honor both of the communities and to tap into what we've learned from some of our culture.
I don't get to vote on this, but I just want to remind the board, I guess, I think that right now you're tasking administration saying that you got to move forward with this concept, but just keep in mind that if, when it comes to budget voting time, if the rationale is not there, right, and this cost savings aren't there, there's other things, you can always say no to this in the form of a no vote to the budget. So right now, it's you guys are deciding whether you want to give Mary Beth this direction or not. But the rest of the details are still yet to come, but they're still going to happen before budget time.
But we as a board,
I would expect that you would hope that some of these details would come before budget time, before we finally vote on the budget.
Yes, observation and then a question for Mary Beth. I think the concern from Reading that we heard is would this be a step towards closure, and that being the bigger fear. And what I'm hearing is that this is more of a shoring up of Reading as a resource and a more sustainable vision for its future. And perhaps it will grow back into a larger campus in the future if numbers soar, for instance. So I want Reading to know that we heard that, and I think this is a commitment to their school and to their community. And I was just hoping you could also, Mary Beth, speak to concerns about transitions for kids. This gets into a bit of the academic advantages of moving the upper grades into a larger setting in terms of preparedness for middle school. And that's something I've heard anecdotally for years from people who've gone through the system and have said, oh, I felt so overwhelmed when I got to the middle school because I was in such a small class. So maybe you could speak to the sort of the pros and cons of what makes the balance tip in your mind towards this as a better model for older kids that outweigh the challenges of having to go through that adjustment.
I mean, one of the things that I would echo that I've heard those same concerns regarding that, by moving these grades out, it's a step closer to the school. And I really appreciate the fact that there's a really strong statement here that that's not what's intended here. But to figure out how we get a really sustainable structure there in Reading, because, I too, like the board, has heard the importance of these community assets. And I think that the ability to create a sustainable model that kind of addresses some of the financial issues that we looked at becomes much better when we look at a primary versus a pre-K to 6 model. When we get to grades 4 through 6, we are just able to offer more programming at a larger school. We are able to give kids more opportunities in terms of peer groups than they currently have in a much smaller school environment. They are able to be, their teachers have the ability to collaborate with grade level colleagues that really can be very helpful in programming. After school types of activities where kids are getting to know one another before they are moving off collectively into middle school, high school environments. Things like, innovation lab, repetition. One of the things we're looking at is more language programs, and what does that look like? Smaller chunks over time that becomes really difficult to deliver in a campus that Spanish people have to travel to for a minute session. So there's a lot of educational value to it, there's developmental value to it, there's some social value to it. And I understand it's not 100%, right? But there are places that you can make arguments, so you lose this, or for this type of child, it would probably be better if this happened. But in whole, as we do the assessment on this, there does seem to be both educational and social values for kids. And I trust that we have a leadership team and a staff of educators that can ensure that the transition to these students is solid and that they feel welcome in the school, that they have to do that.
Adam?
So, first, thank you to the Finance Committee, because I know you put a lot of work in what you've done to prepare this. Second, I appreciate the sentiment of what we voted on and the first option. I don't know if we're really calling them option day. And I want that spread across the district. So, with that being said, my concern in voting yes to this is we're limiting the options of what we can do with Reading without knowing what we can come up with, engaging the community about possible investments across the district from option 1. So that, to me, we're making too many steps too fast. And you're tired of hearing me say we're going so fast, right? And I add the analogy of a really bad movie, Speed, with Keanu Reeves, a great actor. Our foot doesn't have to be stuck on the gas right now. We're able to slow down and make some more options. So here we've made some progress. Why are we jumping to this all of a sudden when we still have potentials to further invest in how we really could honor what we're saying? We're going to engage the community and inform this committee and how are we going to impact the district as a whole.
I just believe that item number 1 was saying that a committee is going to be put together once again with all communities. I asked how many different people from where. So Reading and everybody else will have a part of this, every town will. And I don't think we're putting the foot to the pedal on this. I think what we're saying right now is that we have a budget that we need to present, and it has to be done within, we need to have this in print for whatever in January, okay? What I did hear out of this proposal here on a yes vote, and I had said it also, is that you go back to number one. What I just heard here was that this may not be forever 4, 5, 6. You know, it will. Let's find ways of maybe bringing it back 4, 5, and 6 there. But without that community input, we don't know how we're going to do that.
I know we already voted on one, but I'm hearing maybe some confusion. Can you just go back to one? I just wanted to.
Campus configuration there.
Yes, but I thought it only pertained to Prosper Valley. So am I wrong in thinking?
Well, shall the board establish a committee to develop a plan for the campuses in our district?
Okay, so it's the whole.
But it is, the reason we've really developed this and the reason that we're pushing it to the forefront is we need to decide what to do with the actual Prosper campus.
Okay.
If we're going to make this investment and we're going to ask the voters to invest in it, what is our plan for that campus?
Right.
So, you know, really, it's a key part of the Prosper Valley. But I mean, it's a full discussion, which is why Bob said, you know, we have this 21st century that's really looking at the middle and high school as well. And I'm sure, and it absolutely connects with this as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So school choice remains throughout this process, correct? So the question being, so we make Reading pre-K go to 3. And people say half of our families, half of our kids are moving, we're in a school choice, those pre-K through 3. We now, next year, talking about, we only have 15 kids in Reading.
I think that's already given. How many children are in Reading from pre-K through 6 right now? And with moving 4, 5, and 6 over, I believe the numbers showed that there was 15 children total.
Previous slides.
You got that? And we'll show you the.
It was 25.
25.
And they have pre-K there as well, so it's not terrible.
Is the pre-K in with that 25 or not?
No, it's
What
not.
I'm expressing is my concern that people then say, well, we'll just school choice out, and now, you know, our school population shrunk even more.
Because their siblings are going to say one
I do just want to make one point here, Adam, that this is not the first time we have ever talked about doing this with Reading. So,
Absolutely.
you know, I mean, we had this full discussion last year as well. So I don't, you know, I'm not sure it's that we've just been rushing through everything. We did have this discussion last year as well.
Well, I understand your concern about them opting out with their younger, siblings. One of the things that was a concern when we voted over the summer was we were talking about having wedding at 6th graders because we went this year. And one of the main reasons I didn't vote for that was because we felt like it was not giving those children enough time to prepare to move to another school. We were giving them like 3 months. Yeah, I don't think we're putting the pedal to the metal, but we also do need to make a choice that we are preparing these kids for whether we fly out of comfortable with the other votes because we weren't. We vote now, it's kind of giving these, if this is going to pass, it's giving these children more time to actually prepare for the move as well, which was one of the concerns from the last ones, at least to me. Well, I do agree with you what you're saying about the younger siblings and that.
And the school choice piece too will be around, part of that decision accepting whether school choice occurs is around capacity of schools chooses to attend.
So there are a couple of things. So if you look at, if you look at like 6th grade, for example, we've got some pretty high numbers there. So there's unlikely that we would move students in there. School choice also, the way it is set up, it is in the end superintendent's call So, you know, I think that what I hear from the board, and I think we're all in agreement on it, that there's trying to preserve viability for Reading. And so if we get numbers that start to put that viability in question, I have the authority as superintendent to not approve the moves in terms of school. That's my understanding of the structure.
And isn't
that
the
is
school choice also, is it, part of it is it's making it so that the school, the class size is so low that it's, like you said, not viable? Is that part of it, that they can't do the move if it's?
Right, if it puts it in a situation where the viability is questioned in the classroom,
Yes.
then at that point, the superintendent has the ability to say, we're not going to make this choice. And if you look, you know, if you look at something like third grade for next year, you're already up around 19, 20. So, you know, as opposed to a second, third grade class of 11. So you're really going to, you would have to be a real stretch there in terms of many students moving it down.
Move the question.
Second.
So it's going to be a hand vote for a third time. Shall the students in grades 4 through 6 of Reading Elementary School be integrated into the common campus and grade configuration of TPVS and WES? All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed? One. Okay, the ayes have it. Okay. I think that's our last slide. Okay, so we have more business to do. We take, quick 5-minute break.
Okay, transportation policy, you're up, Karen.
No, we have a
What?
Thank you. I'm sorry, I would really like to go home, so we can move on.
We're not doing it?
We are right now.
Okay, go.
We have a transportation policy that was put together. This is the first warning. Everybody's been provided the policy. Mary Beth, would you like to speak to the creation of this policy and how you and Sherry helped put this together, or not?
The transportation goals?
Yeah.
No, Sherry can speak to it, but I was not involved in those conversations.
The creation of the transportation policy and what y'all gathered.
Oh,
Right. So we.
no, I'm sorry, I thought the actual formulation of this. What we did do is we gathered transportation policies from other districts to try to get a sense of what other organizations have come up with, and those were presented to the policy committee in order to kind of get a sense of how other districts have handled it.
So, and we based it off the Vermont School Board Association's model policy and then incorporating elements of 3 or 4 other school board transportation policies.
So this is the first reading.
This is the first reading.
Does anybody have any comments or suggestions or amendments that they'd like to see? Jennifer?
Well, I just have a question about it. What is the, Sherry, what's the, or Mary Beth, whoever, what's the thought process behind not having preschoolers on the bus? I mean, that, you know, that's, I've heard that over the years. You know, I mean, it creates, if we have public preschools, you know, why do we not have the kids on the bus?
I can have a couple thoughts, and then if anybody from the policy committee would like to add into that, but one, it's actually fairly unusual for folks to have preschool students on the bus, and you don't typically see that in districts. Part of it is when you've got 3 and 4-year-olds.
You're being car seats.
Car seats, you know, that you can have toileting issues, you can have, you know, impulsive behavioral issues, and that it can be really difficult to ensure student safety.
Yeah.
So that's
No, I absolutely, I understand. I just, you know, I think we even had somebody at the last meeting, a parent, comment on that. You know, it's difficult if you don't have, I think they were actually reflecting on the difficulty of drop off and pick up in this building when they're not allowed to ride the bus, and then, you know, trying to pick them up and drop them off, so, okay.
The primary concern for us was safety.
Yeah.
I had a question about, oh, sorry, so to piggyback on that, the pre-K question, or even K, you know, kindergartners on the buses, we don't have aides on buses for little ones that are riding, that's right? No. That was a question. Okay. And I have another one, but.
So back when Dan French was consulting with the policy committee, we had talked a little bit about the transitioning the late bus from the sort of funny, uneven system that we had to making it more equitable. And so I missed the meeting when we put this together to warn it. So I had really wanted to add to it, and I wonder if we can talk about that. Something like late buses will balance equity of opportunity with costs and maybe provided where there's a demonstrated need, and including either something like middle school, high school procedures will define how that opportunity actually happens to show the need, or district communities will be given an opportunity to demonstrate via survey or something like that, because what we had talked about is that theoretically, in the four cardinal directions of all of the major roads, there are kids that are, you know, we shouldn't only give one district the opportunity to do after-school activities. It's not fair. So, but obviously, if there's only 2 children that need it in Tassau or Reading, then it doesn't make sense. So we have to kind of figure out just a better way to actually make that happen, because Barnard has been, and Pomfret have been in a situation where we have been trying to demonstrate that opportunity. We created a survey. We seem to have the ridership. It's in the budget, but we haven't been able to see a bus this year yet.
And do we legally have to even provide after-school buses for late buses?
We don't have to provide any.
Because we don't have to provide any buses.
The only
so-
issue is that you could theoretically set yourself up, and I'm not saying this is the correct way, but for a lawsuit, if it's like, imagine if it was neighborhoods and only one neighborhood got.
No, so my question is, I agree with you. I think the equity amongst all the towns for a late bus or no late bus at all, because I've also heard that there's a lack of participation with the late bus as well. And it depends on the year-to-year.
It also depends on the season. There have been years where we haven't had it during certain seasons, where you don't get as much ridership.
I think one of the other issues with the ridership is the issue of, like, they're not allowed to have their hockey equipment, so that diminishes ridership. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So,
So part of that is
The policy.
policy, right? Putting equipment in aisleways and other paths that prevent it, or it's loose kind of thing. But I will say that what we did add into this was stipulation based on a budget, or the cost of the bus given to us by Richard, of at least 10 students were transported a minimum of 3 days per week. I think what Pamela's concern was that how do you determine those 10, how do you determine that?
you have to have a trial run. You have to, otherwise there's no opportunity.
But you can have a sign up in the high school office for kids who want to take access. I mean, we had, at one point, we did have a Barnard, task for Barnard bus. There were so few kids, there was 2 to 3 kids a run. But you can have a pre-sign up, just like you do for driver's ed or anything else.
But we do have a sign up, and we have the kids. I don't know if they'll really ride it, but we do.
I mean, I think that when we talk about those communities, like when I surveyed the town of Mammoth, they would just like them Spotswood even, because they like to have the buses there, because they would at least only have to go to Guardian Academy to pick up their kids. I do agree that it has to really be worthwhile, and if we talk about this, it would have to be that you have these certain 2 or 3 stops that encompass 4 towns in a year or something. You know, it's not like you want to just drive around doing all these loops every night at 5:30, 6 o'clock at night, you know? But I think if you have these certain places, like on the Killington, obviously, like Pittsfield would come there and be able to pick up their...
Just to be clear, the Killington, if we're gonna call it the Killington late bus, the Killington late bus goes to one stop in Killington. And that bus in Killington, it may stop along the way through Bridgewater to one place. I'm not sure of that, okay? But anyone from Pittsfield does come to the shack.
To the stop.
To the stop, okay, that's it. all, what Pamela was saying and Bryce saying is that it was said that it was in the budget for Barnard and Reading. And there was Pomfret, I'm sorry, Pomfret and Barnard. Okay? And it was not, and it's not being done for them to even test it. That they have the sign-ups. That's all.
That's, I mean,
what people said.
and we contracted for that, Richard, with the bus company?
Yeah, the way Butler works is.
Well, then why are we not doing it?
It's a matter of us telling them that there is a ridership, and then they'll have the driver and give it a go. And there is a price to it. So, I mean, it has always tended to come from the high school principal, is because the high school principal has the information to do it. So once the request is to put in place, it can be put in place.
But it's in our budget for this year?
It is.
But it's not being utilized.
No, it's currently not being utilized, and I understand there's no bus going out there.
So let's try it. So how do we get that done?
We
Try
pass
it, give it a
So
month.
We pass this on to Garrett, and he'll. and
So that's not the problem with the policy. The problem is we haven't
Well, I
done what is in the budget.
Suggesting that we add a sentence in here that encourages us to have a
Will
procedure.
you come up with that
Yeah.
sentence to go into the second reading then?
Yeah, I think it just needs to be one sentence that states we
Okay.
have a procedure that tells us how we're going to do this, so
Do we need a vote?
and then we identify what that procedure
Rena, do I need a vote?
We don't have a motion.
Do I
We
need
need
a
a motion to accept first reading.
Okay, do I have a motion to accept first reading?
Whatever you're doing, warn for second reading.
Adam moved, Lou moved
To do what?
to accept the first reading.
I have two items on the transportation thing. Number one is just getting down, at one point it says that the buses shall run on public roads only, and it's at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So if you're having a late bus, we'll clean it up, okay, because it will be past 4. And I know Killington, it does not stay on a public property. It goes on to private property, so I don't know what the other towns are. So just so we make sure our policy is clear.
But that's an attempt, it doesn't say it is, and that's outside of the late bus schedule. So the
It
late
says
bus
the
is another
district
item.
attempts to maintain a bus schedule.
Yeah.
Before. So it's fine.
That's so that there's.
We'll bring it back in a second.
Let's tighten it up a little bit, folks. So,
Pretty
do
tight.
I need a motion?
You already
You
got
need to know whether it's reading for a second reading, or you're going to adopt?
It's gonna need a second reading because we need to put that sentence in there.
Yeah, we're gonna warn it for a second reading.
Okay. Who's motion motion to warrant for a second?
Pamela's motioning for it.
it.
Adam's motioning for it.
I'm seconding first.
All those in favor, second reading?
Aye. So on that note, can I just make a quick statement? So I would just like to say that I am stepping off the board because I've moved to outside of Bridgewater and can no longer represent Bridgewater. So I just want to say thank you.
That was my next announcement.
Well, I'm making it. So thank you to everyone for.
Who's your replacement?
Huh?
You can't get out.
I have recommended Matt Huff, actually, to the select board as a replacement. Matt Huff is Michelle Huff is his wife. She works in the district. She's a graduate of Woodstock.
And he coaches baseball.
And he is.
It's a small world.
That's my recommendation to the select board, just so you know. And I did ask him first.
I wondered I was.
Okay, so I'm just going to quickly go on to board reports. I received from Tim Bishop Karen's resignation letter effective tonight, so I just want to let you all know. So thank you, Karen, for your service. I also wanted to say that Jennifer and I have reevaluated kind of the subcommittees that we've seen over the last year to year and a half, and determined that some have been really effective, some haven't been so effective. We also wanted to see how the vote went tonight before we solidified anything. We're going to reconvene over the next couple days to assign people to these subcommittees. Or please reach out to either one of us if you have interest in being assigned to a subcommittee. But what we're looking at is a finance committee, a policy committee, a negotiations committee. We would like to do a community engagement committee that really starts sending out these kind of, what we did tonight on our electronics, of sending out surveys to the hot topic questions and things like that, so that we get more answers from a broader base of our community. Stakeholders, meaning students, we can send that off to students, parents, teachers, administrators, community members, et cetera, et cetera. But we think that that's really important. So we'd like to do a community engagement committee. And then, of course, we're going to reconfigure and look at campus configurations and buildings and the future of them, and what that's going to look like, both short-term and long-term. So we obviously have our short-term within the next year, what Prosper is going to look like in the next year, and then long-term commitments to middle school, high school, to the Reading campus, being something more than maybe just a primary school, to West, to Killington, and so on and so forth. So we're going to have those 5 subcommittees, and if you have interest in being on one of them, you have this burning desire, send us an email and let us know. And then December, we will do a little printout of who's on each committee and who the chairs are of those committees. I also wanted to kind of update you, a bee was kind of put in my bonnet to remind me of this. On December 17th, we'll be having a special meeting to talk about Barnard. As we had talked about it previously, I think in September maybe, we are going to vote on whether or not we would like to accept Barnard into our new district. I know that the state has made an initial decision that Barnard should join our district, but we as a board need to formally vote on it. I also want to let you know that Steve Stitzel had received, who is our lawyer, he represents the district, had received a letter from a gentleman stating that he was representing the Barnard Academy School, which was to my surprise because in their minutes I did not see him being hired by the Barnard School to represent them. So Jennifer and I talked with Mary Beth and Steve and asked him to send a reply to the lawyer asking if indeed he has been hired by them and retained by them to negotiate on their behalf new articles of agreement so that they will voluntarily come into the district. We will talk about this more at length at our December 17th meeting, but it has been advised to both Jennifer and I as co-chairs to recommend to the board that we don't negotiate individually with individuals' towns, that to us creates an inequity on how each town would then function within a district. But that in the future, if we want to, as a district, a whole district, want to reevaluate our articles of agreement, we can so choose to do that as a full board. But I wanted to give you that update so that you were aware of that thing taking place over the last couple of months. Yep.
I just wanted to point out a couple of things about that. Let's see, to be succinct, I guess number one is that as of said to you personally by email, accepting Barnard into the district is not really the appropriate concept, because Barnard does not wish to be forced to come into the merged district. Barnard may be interested in joining voluntarily, but Barnard has no interest in fighting being forced. So the idea that the December 17th meeting is to accept Barnard is just very strange to people from Barnard. It just doesn't make any sense. Also, the state can only request that this board force merges Barnard. There's no obligation to do so. You can vote no. And I would ask that you consider that. Because I think a merger, there may be things that are happening that would make it desirable for Barnard voters, and I think they should be given a chance to vote to join. But the last thing I guess is that we were told when Bryce and I wrote an email in July saying that we wanted to discuss the possibility of talking about a couple of the articles of agreement again. We were told that we would talk about them, and that we would talk about them in December, but now we're being told that you don't want to talk about them, which doesn't seem fair, and the logic that Barnard is definitely not asking to be treated as a different town, except you all voted to be one district. You're one thing now. We're not in it. So it does make sense for us to say, hey, we might want to be in it, but maybe could we look at article such and such? Because we don't like that. Our voters said no to that, and so it does make sense. The last, I guess I said that was last, but one more last. I just, I can't even imagine myself disrespecting votes from a town. Our town would have known pretty solidly, not overwhelmingly, but pretty solidly. We've kept the pulse of the people in our town, and people are really interested in negotiating or discussing a merger that has terms that they can feel good about and feel like they're good for our students and good for our taxpayers. And I think that's possible. I really, really do. I think we've made a lot of progress in the past 18 months and can see some of those things. So I would just, I would never vote for another town. If Woodstock said, no, we don't want to be a part of an entity, I would never force them to do so against their electorate. And I just am shocked that it would even be a thing. Thank you.
Can I just answer some of those questions? One, we are to negotiate with the Barnard board members, and you don't represent the Barnard School Board, from what I understand.
Right.
You don't sit on this Barnard School Board.
Correct.
Okay.
I'm speaking for.
I understand, but so my directive has been to have my conversations with Corinne, who is the Barnard School Board's chair, which I have done. And so those conversations will continue with her through Jennifer and myself as chairs of this board. But I'm just passing along to everybody the recommendations that were made to us on how to proceed. And that's why we've set up the December 17th meeting, so that we can further the conversation and have a more in-depth conversation, so everybody here can think about what they think is fair coming into that December 17th meeting, one way or the other. And if they don't feel that it's fair to not negotiate new terms with an individual town, then we will talk about it as a full board and vote on that. If they do think that it's fair for all towns to come in under the same articles of agreement, then that's what the board will discuss and come to terms with it. We have the right to vote yes or no to accept you into the new district. That is the board's right to accept you or not. I understand your standing, Pam. I get it and I respect it, but we also have to work as a board in what's in the best interest as the whole district too. Jim, you had a comment?
Yeah, so my understanding is the December 17th meeting was supposed to be set up, and we would find out what was happening on the state.
Correct.
Okay. In the meantime, there's some attorney that's staying, whatever. We don't have clear record that if he really is working for it.
It has not been confirmed one way or
Do you know if he is?
But
I thought the board of the school board took a resolution, made a resolution about it. I'm not.
Not in your minutes, so I can't.
So basically, that's one of the clarifications we would need. And then the second is that you're welcome to come here, Barnard, and you're welcome to come here on December 17th and put your argument in front of us and sell your no vote that you want us to vote. That's your job on that date. And this board has given that opportunity for that. And I understand where you're coming from. And on the one hand, we were going to have a vote at another point where this board said, no, we were not going to take that vote at that point. So you need to come back with a group of people and convince this board of the benefits of that you're talking about. But right now, we don't know what those benefits are until that conversation, because we have not allowed you to have that conversation. So December 17th, we're allowing you to have that conversation. And then unfortunately, the state has put us into this position where the rest of us that are not involved have to make a vote. So you guys want to give us a good start and tell us what's the benefits.
Yeah, I would, so as far as the lawyer goes, I'm not sure the people realize, I can tell you the board does support it. It might, technically, he might have been hired by the select board, and I'm not sure how that fell. It was a combination of the select board and school board at meetings, so it may be it's like,
So I suspect that we can probably fill that meeting. Maybe it won't go to 10, but we can get, there's probably going to be enough to hold it one way or the other.
Fill out your forms on your reflection of how the meeting went today.
I emailed it, it's all, I have your email.
So you're not done yet, you have to finish the form.
I don't have an executive session right now. Do I have a motion to end the meeting, please?
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.